I made the film Planet Lockdown, a film and interview series on the whole COVID issue and the broader the broader situation, political, economic. Because yeah, and I think in my view, from what I can see, the virus is sort of the distraction. It's sort of the like all these unending crises and headaches we see in the press. It's sort of the excuse to do all these political and economic things. So I'd like to introduce Catherine here as one of the interviews I did, and she was a former investment banker and cabinet secretary, I'd say undersecretary in the Bush senior administration. Political appointee. Under cabinet. Yeah. So in the spirit of conversations, here's a discussion between the two of them.
Can you hear me? No. Is it working? No? I'll use that one. Is that working? Okay, great. First of all, I would like to say that's a really incredible presentation. You can't believe they've been up to this for up to so much for so long, but I think that was very helpful, and you compressed a lot of information into a short period, so I'd like to ask for another round of applause. That was... So I confess, we had dinner in Stockholm, how long ago? 6 weeks ago?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, and I've been reading the book on the Rockefellers. It's very good. So let me dive in and ask first a question, and it comes down to the question of power. So I've always viewed the World Economic Forum as kind of a marketing arm of the New World Order. And if you look at the nuts and bolts of power, the nuts and bolts of power are engineered by the ability to print money, combined with the ability to use force, whether it's the military, intelligence, or the enforcement arms. You know, mostly of sovereign governments, but now more and more mercenaries. Talk a little bit about the intersection between the World Economic Forum and the guys who print the money and the guys who control the guns.
Yes, I mean, I showed the trustees of the World Economic Forum. And I mean, we find all these top players at that level. And they are the shapers behind the scenes. But I would say that they now are not that much behind the scenes anymore, because they are very much out in the open. And you have all the money printers. They are represented in the World Economic Forum now. And one thing that I was surprised of, I wrote a doctoral thesis that came out in 2012. And I think I mentioned the World Economic Forum 1 or 2 times in that thesis. Because for me, World Economic Forum was just a meeting every year. Where elites were going with their private jets and helicopters and had partying and discussing business, nothing more. So I was very surprised to see that how this organization evolved and how this powerful interest behind pushed this as and it's a kind of a front organization, of course. I would say it's a little more than marketing. I would say that they have put more and more power behind the organization, especially when they upgraded to this international organization for public-private partnerships. But I found this more or less. It's a nice word for more like a fascist way to rule the world when the big business and the powerful states and the financial top managers come together and decide the agenda. And it's not our agenda, of course.
Mm-hmm. So one of the questions we all ask is, we have technology being used to dramatically centralize... No? Yes? We have technology being used to dramatically centralize power and to institute control that compromises both national and individual sovereignty. But there's a huge debate now as to whether the tensions between the BRIC nations and the G7 is because the Chinese and Russians, et cetera, want to control their own control grid, and they don't want their control grid controlled by the Anglosphere or the G7. So, so is this a fight by the BRICS to preserve national sovereignty so that they can compromise their own individual sovereignty, or is this a real fight to protect sovereignty? What's the state of play?
Well, the thing is, I mean, there's a lot of people that talk about this. I mean, we have Russia and China as special interests that they want to take care of themselves or be up there with the big players and protect their nations. But when you look behind the scenes and the system that has been built up, and especially the G20 group, I find the G20 group especially fascinating. And I remember when I was at the university, hardly anyone knew about the G20. We didn't discuss this as this big new forum because the G20, they consist of Russia, which consists of China and United States and Britain, these supposed enemies, and they have like 150 meetings every year where they discuss this agenda, where they discuss how to, especially financials. G20 was formed in 1999 because of the Asian crisis. And when in 2009 it became upgraded, and they don't just have a meeting every year. It's exactly with World Economic Forum, but I thought, they only have this meeting where they have some fun and partying. That was the same with the G20. Okay, we just meet once a year and talk, but it's so much more. I mean, it's and they have. The G20, and that would be a very interesting thing as well to have a lecture about, because it's very much more to be said about it, because they have this year they have a leader country but it's driving the agenda, and that's Indonesia, and together with last year's president for G20, that was Saudi Arabia. And that's interesting also with nations in the world that they are not democratic. Mm-hmm. That's not always talk about democracy and defending democracy. In this world, in the G20 or in the World Economic Forum, they are not interested in democracies. And they have this agenda, and also they have the next year's president with them to form and to see that the agenda is carried on all the time. And behind this, we find the same players as we find behind the World Economic Forum. It is the OECD, it's the IMF, it's the World Bank, it's all these, and the Bank of International Settlements. They are very, very important in this work. And they have these meetings. So, I mean, the Russian finance minister sits in these meetings with the Chinese and with Americans and the Europeans and the Indians. And so it's when you see that, it's we have this. It's like a theater play, more or less. Everybody talk about the BRICS countries and the G7 and these conflicts, but behind this, they work on all the time. Yeah.
Well, can you imagine Bono giving a concert when the Nazis marched into Paris? So I was very glad you brought up Cyber Polygon, because I think that's a very important planning exercise. So I think you had it run by Israel. There were 11 countries, but we're talking about something that could have a dramatic impact on the banking system. While they're doing these planning exercises, they've been working to change the banking system so you can have bail-ins. You can essentially, the banking system can grab all of our deposits and saying we're the equivalent of unsecured creditors, and in a bankruptcy, they're going to fund it instead of with government money. So instead of bailouts, we'll have bail-ins. So I just saw a headline today saying that Coinbase, the new crypto exchange, or not new, but new going public, just announced they have $438 million of losses in the first quarter, and pointing out if they go bankrupt that their depositor, the assets they're holding as custodian could also be converted to unsecured creditors. So as you watch this planning exercise, you're watching an evolution into something that could literally become a seizure mechanism for the vision, it's 2030, you have no assets and you're happy, or at least you have no assets. And I would like to point out one other thing that many people are not aware of. The new package to gift $30 billion, if you will, to the Ukraine, or add $30 billion, includes a major package on creating an international seizure infrastructure. So talk to us a little bit about Cyber Polygon. Talk to us a little bit about this vision of you have no assets. What's the plan to get from here to there to basically take over and seize all the assets? As you read in the World Economic Forum, what do you think they're thinking?
Let's have it all. I mean, one thing with that's the goal to bring make everything digital. And that's if you don't have it digital, I mean, you can't control all if you don't. And that's why we talked about to create this digital Marshall Plan back in it was like after the financial crisis in 2009. Because they wanted to include everyone. Everyone should be connected, and also be connected. You have to have this digital ID so that all your assets are marked with your name on it, and you can also have this mechanism to just pull them out from you whenever you like. I mean, and I think it's what we have seen with Russia as well. But they really can do that, and we just stop. I mean, Russian bank accounts and everything, and we just strip their assets. We just take, and we can take an individual and say, no, you're Russian. You're not allowed to have this anymore. So they have showed their power and what they can do. And this is very, very dangerous, a very dangerous society that we can't have it.
I have a question for you too. Looking at the rise of CBDCs being pushed out, what is your perspective in retrospect on the Bitcoin project?
On the...
What was the origin, or do you look at it in a suspicious way, or does it have intelligence hands on it, or how do you view the Bitcoin project now that the CBDCs are coming out?
So I've always viewed Bitcoin as a prototype. It was encouraged as a prototype. When you look at a situation like this, you're always stacking functions. So the first thing is you have an effort to buy up and control all the real assets, the farmland, the gold. If you look at just since the financial crisis, the top 100 landowners have doubled or tripled their land holdings. So while they're buying up the gold or they're buying up the real estate, they want as little competition as possible. And Bitcoin in the United States, at least, has been unbelievably efficient at getting retail money away from those assets and into Bitcoin. So part of it is you're trying to hold down inflation. Part of it is you need prototyping to figure out how the digital currency systems might happen. And it's quite clever because you get all the most committed freedom fighters to figuring out your stuff for you. You know, and you can pump it and dump it, and obviously there are lots of other functions you can use. So I think it's complex, and many of the people doing or investing in Bitcoins really would like to see a fiat currency that couldn't be inflated, or a currency that couldn't be inflated and debased the way the current sovereign currencies are. They don't realize, I think, the danger of facilitating a process of destroying national sovereignty, because it will ultimately end in the destruction of individual sovereignty. So it's a complex story, but I think it has been used phenomenally successfully by both the central bankers and the intelligence agencies. It's been a huge success for them. Do you want to?
Yeah, we always do that. I mean, it's like when you want to introduce something new, you let the nerds do it, and you make it cool. It's like this biohacker movement. That it's cool to upgrade yourself. It's cool to have a chip implanted and everything. And these are more like the anarchists, and so they always do this.
Right.
Yeah?
Here's the thing: there's a tremendous demand globally for the ability to transact together at low transaction cost, and that's real. And Bitcoin has been contributing to serious improvement. And the important thing to understand is, you know, Bitcoin could be a wonderful and very cool thing, because our problem is not financial. Our problem is the governance system. That's why I love your work. Because because the question is, who's Mr. Global, and why is Mr. Global doing this, and how do we stop him? And our problem is that if Mr. Global gets 100% digital control, we're in deep doo-doo, and they're moving very rapidly. So the danger of digital, the danger of Visa credit cards is just as great as Bitcoin. So our problem is we don't want a secret, evil governance system to get digital control. So there's nothing, in my mind, there's nothing wrong with Bitcoin. The problem is who's governing, who's controlling. And that's what has to be changed, whether it's Visa cards or, a digital bank account. So now I'm going to ask you a question I've always wanted to know the answer to. Ready?
Who is God?
No, that I'm not worried about. So this is a cultural question, and it's a question for somebody who's really studied these people and thought deeply about them. And so you have a group of people who are basically saying, we have environmental catastrophe, we have climate change, so everybody has to reduce their carbon footprint. Everybody's got to reduce their use of energy. Everybody's got to reduce the amount of food they use, consumerism, reduce. Yet they're flying around in these fancy jets, and you've never seen more lavish expenditures per person in your life. And they have no concern for that as a marketing issue, let alone an ethical issue. So they have no ethical compunctions, and they have no marketing concerns that might hurt their cause. So that represents to me, that's a real cultural phenomena. Can you give a sense of why they have, who are these people?
I mean, I have hardly met some of them. I think I haven't met the Rockefellers. I haven't met Kissinger. But you have. So maybe you have more answers to this. But it is like they are better. They feel that they are better, and they are better at governing everything, and that gives them the right to have other privileges than us. They think themselves as the smart people. They are. Can't come this far up the ladder, and if people are so stupid that they go along with what we say, it's their fault. It's not our fault. If people can't figure out this, they are stupid people, and then they don't deserve anything. I think they really just laugh at people, what they are doing, and just following all these rules all the time. And I mean, John D. Rockefeller said that himself. I mean, it's my way to show these low people how smart people act and do things.
So I have to say I saw a different mentality in David and Nelson and that generation. They cared about appearances. They were, they felt a need to be subtle. As more and more the ethic was, we can get away with anything. We did this, we got away. Every time they get away with something, they push the envelope and they get worse. And now we've reached a state of complete psychopathy. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because it works. I mean, what they would argue is it works. And I can't come up with a retort to that. Can you? No.
No, and I think, it's like with psychopaths or a little 3-year-old that shouts and wants everything. You have to say, we stop now. It's not okay. Right. Yeah, and if every one of us do it, right, they can't do anything because they have no real power. Right. It's just an illusion of power. We give them power, and now we have to take it away.
Okay, so now can I ask you a question? Okay, so I don't think when you first made Planet Lockdown that you had any idea how viral it would go and what a tremendous impact would it have. So let me ask you, when you started Planet Lockdown, when you started the interviews to when you finished the documentary, how did your paradigm, how did your framework, how did your worldview change from the start when I first met you to where you are now?
I guess I was familiar with the material he presented, and that we had this issue of international financial interests pushing us away from our sovereignty, the global warming issue being used as a false sort of distraction to get people to live in a way that they think we should live as more like impoverished peasants that don't eat too much, That sort of threat to U.S. sovereignty I was aware of, but when I did that interview with you that day, frankly, I thought it sounded a little out there when and then you're talking about the injections in the cloud and all this stuff, and I didn't know what to make of that. I mean, that was definitely new to me. I heard this idea transhumanism punted around, but it just seemed a little bit kind of cuckoo and not so I don't know, it just seemed like kind of absurd. I think it's still very absurd, but yeah, I guess the sort of, I didn't realize how far reaching and brash these plans were. And I think that the architecture, the Bank of International Settlements of the Tower of Babel sort of embodies this attitude where, in the story, Nimrod builds the tower to heaven and God, destroys the temple and scatters in the languages, and now they sort of think they can be better than God or like design people with their fantasies or something. It just seems like it'll be a total mess, and a lot of people punt the words around like eugenics, this, that. I mean, to me, this looks like dysgenics. They're just like trashing people. They're injecting them with all kinds of God knows what. So I just don't. I see this as like a weakening program. It sort of looks like a massive weakening the population mentally, weakening their will, spiritually detaching them from themselves. So. Yeah, I don't know. It's even the last 2 years is almost like every week some super crazy out there bizarro world thing. Yeah, so I never thought I'd have to come to terms with things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask this question of both of you. So I'll start with you, and then I'm going to come to you, Jacob. So you've been through a journey where in my book, you've met some of the most amazing people all over the world. So you have built an incredible, phenomenal network of people, as have you. I know the person who introduced me. And we have this habit as a network of saying, oh, you know, we found another great person, you know, and we get. So tell us about how the quality of your network has improved as a result of these last 2 years.
I guess I was very touched by the honesty of the people I interviewed. That I think comes through a lot in the film and the interviews. I let them speak, and that I found the most touching. And I mean, it's a pretty emotional project to make because it was so. It was like a culmination of a lot of my interest in work and understanding what's the meaning of life. What is there ethics? I believe in natural law, you know, and that we're here to develop our human relationships with one another, and do what's right, even though it's a harder thing to do, you know. So I think a lot of the people I interviewed, like Alexandra is here, and some other people who are. Astrid. I mean, they're like, I was just very touched by the candid sincerity and their conviction to speak the truth, even though they're going to face all kinds of headaches, and knowing that they're like, what's the meaning of life? Is it to kowtow to and submit yourself to really dehumanizing miserable things just for some monetary reward, or is that something you're going to regret when you pass on to another life, and that doing what's right and true, you know, I was so very impressed with these people. So I found that to be very touching. So finding those people, you know, going to meet them in their homes and just let them talk was such a beautiful experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 years. These 2 years has been very fantastic in a way. Actually, I mean, 10 years ago, I wrote this. I was finished with my doctoral thesis. And this thesis, the head of the Club of Rome, he intervened and tried to stop this from being published. Because he was a part of I wrote about the European Union energy politics, and he had been in the Parliament, of the European Parliament, and been one of the most responsible for that. And I found out about his networks and how this functioned, and he read this, and he wanted to stop it. And at that time, I didn't have any friends at the university, because he had friends, professors, and he was often at the Linköping University, and was walking in the corridors and had lectures about environment and stuff. So he had this network, and they were doing all they could to see that I wouldn't have a career. So they couldn't actually stop my thesis. They didn't. I didn't have a press release, and they didn't have it on the homepage, and they tried every way just to quiet it down. But the thing is that everybody started to talk about this doctoral thesis. That why don't the head of Club of Rome, do we want to stop it? So it became. Yeah, he did. It became the most downloaded thesis on Linköping University that year. So it was great. But I was very lonely, and I had very few people that understood these things, and how power politics works, and also the transhumanist agenda and everything. I found out everything that I've been talking about today. I found out how they had worked for a very long time with these things, but nobody really wanted to listen at that time. So But I got very lonely, had very few friends that I could discuss this with. But when that happened, you start to meet your real friends, because that's the ones that come to you, and you connect with them. And this has been increasing year by year. And at first I had this climate scientist that didn't like how the climate issue was presented, and they thought the science was wrong. And a bunch of old elderly men, professors and so on, very few. But the last 2 years, when the pandemic came, it just so many people. I have never had that much so many friends that I have now. So in a way, it was a good thing, because I also think we can do something about it.
So I've only had 2 lunch experiences with Henry Kissinger, but I have to tell you, I'd much prefer to have lunch with you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And now we get our break, right?
Yeah.
Jacob, thank you again. Another round of applause for a great presentation.